Welcome back to the studio. Today we are starting our Christmas themed watercolor series. So each week I will bring you another small watercolor tutorial. These could be used to make greeting cards. They could be painted a little bigger as sort of art gifts for people, or just as a way to fill your sketchbook and an activity to pass the time over the Christmas holidays, where you just want to sit down, you don't want to think too hard, and you just want to paint and enjoy yourself. I do that all the time. I follow other people's little tutorials all the time just to turn my brain off. It's amazing. Amazing fun. So, some of the designs we will be doing are ornaments, and I will be teaching you how to shade a sphere to make it look three-dimensional. So that's just one of the lessons, and a very whimsical approach to the ornaments. We have different types of Christmas trees. We have a little tiny bit of perspective with presents, easy perspective. I'm not actually going to get into teaching linear perspective, but I'll talk you through how to kind of fudge it. And some ornaments that put to practice a bit of that shading of the sphere. And this fun flat lay that was just really quick and invented. I didn't really use resources. I kind of glanced at a couple things, but this could be done on a card too. You could shrink it down, or you could just pick a couple of the elements to put into a card if you wanted to. But I just did it in my sketchbook because it takes up a lot more space. I hope that's of interest to you. I really do. So let's dive into our first watercolor tutorial of this series. All right, we're going to keep this super simple and start with a light sketch. I'm going to go with, stay very Christmassy here, green or red? Let's do green. And the first step is just to get a nice circle. Notice I didn't use my fingers for that. I used my whole arm. So not even from my elbow, this is coming from my shoulder. And I did a couple of really light circles, and then as I got sort of comfortable to get the circular motion down, then you let the tip of the pencil actually touch the paper. And at the top of these, there's usually a little lift like this at these ornaments, and then you can do the little top thingy, don't even know what to call it. And then from that is the little metal hook, right? Or metal hook like this, and then string or again, metal hook words. And in order to make this look spherical, we have to really think about where our light's going to be. So let's have the light coming from the top left, and that means there's going to be a bit of a highlight right here. And then there's, if we're getting super technical about it, we don't have to, but why not do a little mini lesson here? There's 6 types of light that hit a sphere. I'll do this really large actually so that you can see better. So again, making a circle, right? And it's okay to do it several times in order to get that circular shape. The very first one I laid down was definitely less circular. So 6 types of light. We've got the highlight right here, if our light's coming from top left, and that will be the brightest spot. Then we have generally light hitting here. So 1 is highlight. That's your 1. 2 is light. I'm going to just double check you can see what I'm doing here. Let me zoom in for this. Okay, you got highlight and light. Then you have shadow, and that's this next little spot right here. It's just starting to curve around the shape, so it's a bit darker. It's what's not, the light is not directly hitting this, this area here. Then you have core shadow. So the shadow goes all the way around to here. And then the core shadow is kind of like a moon shape right in here. And sometimes that will extend, you know, all the way to the edges, sometimes not. So that's your core shadow. Core shadow. And then back here, the last little sliver is your reflected light. So that's our fifth, reflected light. And that is usually the same-ish value as the shadow. So there's only really 5 different values you're laying down out of this so far. I mean, four values. 1, 2, 3, this one and this one. And then 4, that's your darkest, the core shadow. And then if this were sitting on a table or something, that's where you get the cast shadow. I'll just put that in here. Let's pretend this ornament's on the ground. So this is number 6. This is your cast shadow, and that's your darkest shadow. It is darker than your core shadow, okay? And the reflected light is the same as your shadow, so that's a value of 3. So if we were going to color this, which we'll do next, let's we're going to leave this completely white. That's our brightest highlight. And let's work in maybe this kind of pretty teal turquoise color. So this is our next, it's too dark. I'm just going to add water to that. Our next lightest, still too dark. I'm just going to keep adding water. It's a bit better. We could always use paper towel to dab that off. I think that might be necessary actually. Went a little heavy on the color right off the bat, and it's supposed to be the next lightest thing. We don't want a crazy different step value between the highlight and that. And now I can go a little bit darker with the shadow. What's nice about doing this in watercolor, I always teach this in drawing, but what's nice about watercolor is that these layers, these rings will blend into each other because they're wet and create maybe more of a, it just kind of does the shading for us, because these won't be like distinct rings. Obviously they're supposed to be sort of blended. I'm going to add a bit more color to this one. It's looking a lot like light instead of shadow, so I'm going to add some more in around the edges, and then we're going to go do the third one, which is our, or that's our shadow right there, right? Light and then shadow goes all the way around. Sorry about that. Now is our core shadow, and I'm going to mix a bit of green, that turquoisey color, and I'm actually going to add a bit of, this is ultramarine, yeah, a little bit of ultramarine to this. And if you want to test on the side, that's always a good idea. I recently refilled all these pans, so they look all lovely except for a couple that I ran out of. So they're actually not as dry as they normally would be. So my core shadow is going to be a little different color, a little bit of a different hue. It doesn't necessarily wrap around there. Sometimes it just lands right here. One thing you can do to make this easier on yourself is the value, this third value, the shadow. You could do the whole thing in that third value, and then later come back in and add the core shadow a little darker, because, and by whole thing, oh gosh, okay. What I mean by whole thing is the third section, shadow, and core shadow, and reflected light, you could paint them all as the value 3, as shadow. And then later, it's hard for me to see if this is really circular when I'm not directly over the painting. I'm kind of looking at it from below because of the camera here. So I can't really quite tell if it's wonky, but just bear with me. So you could do all of that. That's probably the way I would do it, actually, is these 3 steps. Do them all as a level 3 shadow. And then once that dries just a little bit, you could drop in your core shadow. So I think I want to make a couple more. I want to ease this transition a little just with some water. It's all damp so that we can play with that a little. I don't really paint spheres in watercolor very much, I'm realizing. This is something I always teach in drawing and drawing media, and that's just a different world of control when you're using drawn stuff. I actually considered shading in with the pencil crayon just to show you, and maybe I'll do that in just a second up with this one. So I haven't waited very, very long for it to dry, but we could just test it out a little bit. I wonder how much this is going to bleed in. You don't know until you try. So our core shadow is like this moon sliver, and it takes up the far end other than this little reflected light. So you've got to leave a little bit of reflected light area. And part of that reflected light, even if you can't see it on the thing that you're looking at, if you're looking at a sphere in life and you cannot see this, it's a little hard to perceive sometimes, that reflected light. By adding it anyway, even if you can't quite see it, you're telling the viewer that this is a round object. Light is creeping around the side, just like it would be in a cylinder. The light is going to creep around the side, and it's going to help the viewer see it as round instead of just two-dimensional circle. They're going to see it more as a sphere. So this is kind of working. Not bad. And I'm okay with it not being perfect. We're going to just do this to learn about shading a sphere, not necessarily making it perfect. It's watercolor, and it's part of its loveliness is its imperfections. While that dries, we could shade this. So same way, we've got the highlight we're not going to touch. Then I'm going to do just regular hatching to lay in the lighted area. Then the next value is shadow, so we're going to keep going. In fact, I'm going to do this hatching over the whole thing. And you can just go straight back and forth with something a drawing this small. That's what I do with a bigger one. You might move your hatch marks to kind of follow the shape of the object, be round like this. It's just one more way to emphasize the form and make it less flat. So this is called, these lines, if they go with the shape of the object, they are called contour lines, cross contour lines. Cross contour lines go around the object. Contour lines can be just outlining. Cross contour actually crosses the object. So we've got this whole thing laid in at about a 2, right? The highlight. Now we have to add in shadow. It's kind of a bit of a challenge with the wet ornament right there, but I'm going to lay in cross contour lines going a different direction. for my 2, my shadow. I might have gone a bit too much over the light area. I just said 2 shadow, but you know I meant 3, I hope. So that's our 2 is the second lightest. Our 3 is this part, the shadow, and that's also what we want the value of the reflected light to be. So we're going to make that all 3. Then we have to drop in our core shadow. Now I'm not doing really hatch lines anymore, hatching, cross hatching, contour. I'm just kind of doing traditional shading. And kind of a bit of a circular motion here to try to keep it soft. And I want to do almost to the edge, but not quite. And sometimes the reflected light is just a tad darker than the shadow, that third value. So adjust as you see fit. I'm looking at this now and I think it's a bit too central. I mean, it shows that the light's coming kind of from right in front, but if I want to move it to match this one, just going to bring the shading on the side up a little bit, and that will help change the direction of the light. So even just changing where I shaded it made the light, instead of coming from the front, it looks like it's coming top left a bit better now. So that's where we're at. And we're not doing the cast shadow on that one, it's hanging, but we could do the cast shadow on this one down here. And it doesn't matter what color, well, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but color of shadows have color. That's what I'm trying to say. Shadows have color. So the shadow could be affected by whatever the ground is. What if this ornament is sitting on a red surface? That's going to change the color of the shadow. What color is the light that is coming down on this? That will change the color of the shadow. If the light is a red light, then the shadow will be sort of tinged red with the absence of words. If the light is red, then the shadow will be tinted green, which is opposite on the color wheel. And you can do that with any of the colors of the color wheel. For example, if the light was yellow, the shadows appear more purpley. If the light is orange, the shadows appear more blue. So a sunset scene maybe will have more, if it was an orange sort of sky or pink sky, it'll be more, what's the opposite on the color wheel to pink? It's kind of green, if pink is closest to red. So we want our, so I just went on a color tangent there, but your shadow can have color. I'm going to make mine more blue. Please excuse my sniffles. Now, when you add decoration or pattern to the ornament, well, before we even do pattern, since it's still a bit damp, we're waiting for it to dry, let's do the little, the top of it. So with the same color that you did this, and if it's sitting on the ground, chances are it's not sitting perfectly upright. So let's put the little lip right here. And maybe the metal part is gold. It's going to bleed in with the blue, but I don't care. That's kind of nice. Same thing, this is like a cylinder. You have to think of things in terms of shapes. So if this is a cylinder, the light will be hitting the top and it will have a bit of a shadow, just like anything. If we don't add a light and a dark side, it's going to look a lot flatter. Let's make that have a little loop there, like a little metal ring. And then from there, a ribbon or the little metal hooks, whatever you want to add. Like, I think we could add quite a cute, oop, that looks very pink. So I'm going to mix these two reds together. I wish I had the names for you off the top of my head. This is quinacridone rose, the darker one, and this one is, oh, what is it? It's a bright, almost orange, transparent red oxide, I want to say. So I'm mixing them together to get sort of your primary cadmium, kind of. And I'm just going to make the ribbon hang down. There's something, there's little flakes here that I really need to clean up. They're in my paint now. Oops. I haven't cleaned the palette in a while, even though I just refilled it. So I'm kind of making mine loop down here. It's hard to make that corner look realistic, but that's okay. I'm gonna leave it like that for now. It doesn't really make sense in terms of you loop that, where's the knot? This could be the knot down here. Okay. Okay. Now we're making some sense. So this is kind of the knot, and then the ends. Yeah, that looks better. Okay. So we've got some magical things happening with the yellow bleeding in and the green and yellow bleeding in. It's kind of doing what watercolor does. And that gave this more time to dry. For the pattern on it, you're going to want to think of those contour lines. So maybe I should describe contour lines a little bit better. So here's your circle. Here, contour lines for something circular might do this, like a beach ball. See that? How they kind of, they go with the shape. And contour lines for a cylinder would do this, right? They'd curve around. And in fact, if you're doing all the way around, if it's see-through, you'll see the whole ellipse. And then, so I should be saying cross contour every time I say that. Anyway, the cross contour lines for the cylinder in this direction are going straight up and down because it is a straight, smooth surface. And then the cross contour lines the rest of the way are doing this. So lines going, cross contour lines going that way, and then also this way. Now we can't just, I mean, we could just do this. They don't have to be like a beach ball. They could kind of do this, like the lines on a globe. But you see how adding just the curve to your lines, if you were shading this, it really helps emphasize its three-dimensionality. Three-dimensionality. Words are hard. This is a, whoops. Yeah, my pencil crayon, my colored pencil here is erasable, which is glorious. Highly recommend. Prismacolor Color Erase. So you're going to want your lines to also curve to show that this is 3D. And here's the top of our shape right here. So we won't want to do the pattern this way. That doesn't make sense. We have to kind of match it to this. So it's still wet. This isn't drawing on there at all. So we'll have to wait and come back to that. But since I have kind of working. I was just thinking of adding a bit of detail here, like a scalloped edge to this metal part, and a tiny bit of a shadow. I mean, small details. I'm just kind of killing time while I wait for it to dry. Cute. Hopefully you learned something about shading spheres today, and this gives you a basis for painting ornaments or anything else that's round. Like you could apply that to snowmen and things like that. So I'm going to pause the video here, come back when it's dry, and we'll do a couple more studies. I love how this looks though. You see how three-dimensional it looks? I'm wondering, we did the shading well with pencil. I'm wondering if we just added a light, very light wash on it to turn it a different color. For example, let's pick yellow. And if we just add yellow all around, it's going to look, we don't even have to shade with the watercolor, which I'll be honest, I need some practice at. So we shaded with the pencil crayon, now we're dropping in the color, and voila, you have a shaded ornament that you didn't even have to shade with the watercolor. You just basically did the value study in pencil crayon and then dropped in a glaze, kind of, is what we'd call it if we were oil painting. Do a little bit of a, there we go. And all the others had green. There we go. So for this one, let's do a dark band here. And here. And I'm going to make that band get lighter where the highlight is. We've got to acknowledge our highlight. Can't just ignore it. So I'm going to just kind of dab it off there a little and add a little bit more color to the edges so that it looks like it's paler at the top. And then we could do, I mean, maybe just a couple rows of dots would be nice. Maybe just one row of dots. Dilute it a little bit for closer to the highlight. Now I'm just making them a bit bigger. That's kind of fun. I like it, I like it. One thing that you could do, hang on, I'm getting distracted by many things right now. But I think I'm going to add a little bit of shadow here. And then another thing you could do with the ornaments on either like your study or this one is pull out a jelly roll to add some extra patterns, which could be really nice. You could use it for realism, right? Adding highlights and such. But you could also, once this dries, you could add a little pattern to the stripes and whatnot. So I'm going to do 3 ornaments and I'm going to overlap them. So this one is going to be a bit behind. Things that are closer will be a little bit larger, so that one can be the largest. And where do I want the third one? Here, here, here. The third one can go right here and not be overlapping, but I think that's a better composition. So add the tops. They're all going to be facing up this time. And then the little metal part with a bit of a what's that called? Scalloped bottom. And hoops. There we go. Simple, simple. Easiest sketch ever. Then we decide where our light's coming from. Let's keep it top left because that's what we've been kind of working on. So I've marked in my highlights because we're working in watercolor, and I want to keep that part. I want to keep that part pure white. I don't want to put any wash in that area. And some ribbons going up. And notice I was just super, super sketchy, right? I'm not worrying about it at all. I'm going to keep this really loose and jolly. Really loose and, I can't think of another word other than jolly right now. And we're going to need some sort of boughs if this is hanging on a tree. So I'm going to do a couple of those coming in, just see what they look like. In case they look really bad, I can change them out. But we're staying super not realistic here. Jolly is not the word. Whimsical, that's the word I'm looking for. Whimsical, whimsy. So I'm going to stick with 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Not because each one needs to hang on something, but it looks good, doesn't it? Hey, when you stumble upon a good thing. Compositionally, 3s are strong. Anything in group of 3 is strong, or not 3, any sort of odd number, but 3s especially. Let's dive into the paint right away so that we can give it more time to dry as we discuss and think about what else we're going to do with them. So, colors. Traditional, red and green. Do we go pastel? This is where you can get creative. If you want to personalize this, if it's going to be a gift or a card, like your own family's Christmas card, you could do the same number of ornaments as is in your family, or the same, like maybe just the children. And you could put their names on them, which would be a really nice way to personalize it. I'm going to do dark green for my older brother. And again, with the overzealous first wash, and I went over, did you notice I went over the white that I really wanted to leave? But we still have a spot here, we still have a highlight, so it's not all is lost. I moved my water, so now I'm all confused. So I'm going to do green for him. And I'm going to keep it really light and whimsical. I'm going to take this towards turquoise, I think. My mother loves that color. And I'm going to add in a bit, but it's very wet right now, and so I don't think I'm going to be able to achieve a lot of variation. I'm going to have to wait for that to dry just a little bit to add to it. Well, that's fine. Off to a good start. I'm going to do my little brothers. Blue. Oh, I love this color so much. So bright. Really, really, really need to take a moment here and clean up my palette just a tad. That way I can play with, instead of just putting it right on there, I can play with the wash before it even hits the page. Turns out the paint that I already put on there is enough. You can see I'm just doing the very first light layer. This one I tried to layer a bit more dark and it kind of bled out real quick. So I do not mind at all if these blend. The colors are very complementary to each other, blue and green. They will, not complementary. That's deceiving because complementary colors are opposite on the color wheel. But what I mean is they're analogous. They're kind of side by side-ish on the color wheel, and thus if they bleed into each other will look splendid. They won't create mud. And I think the highlights are just a little extreme here. I don't think it's a huge problem, but especially once we add decoration, you know, to the ornaments themselves. What color should I be? I will be, should I be a little purplish? This is the green that I was using for the turquoise was phthalo green, and this blue that I love so much is a cobalt blue, and so I'm mixing the cobalt with the quinacridone rose to make my purplish hue. I'm going to go for the kind of somewhere between a fuchsia and a purple, which I love that color. I can't wear it. I don't know why. Do any of you have favorite colors that you just love and you surround yourself with them, but you can't actually wear them? Like I have lots of drinking vessels of this color and stuff like that, but I don't actually wear this color. I loved pink and purple when I was a little girl, so it makes sense that mixing the two together would be one of my favorite colors as an adult. I'm not even sure if there is a name for the color that I like. I also seriously do not have a favorite color. It changes. I just get obsessed with one color for several months to a year and then change it up. So make sure that your highlights match if they have the same light source. You might have several different highlights on these. They're shiny and there's probably lights in the Christmas tree, so you could have a couple of different highlights actually. You could have little lights reflecting from below and above everywhere. That could be quite interesting. So I'm lifting a couple of spots off as if the light is indeed hitting these ornaments from different directions. Let's do, I'm going to switch, this was an 8 that I've been using the whole time, Princeton Neptune 8. I'm going to switch to the 4 and do some, this is Shadow Violet is the color. And I was going to do those in like a metal color, but I actually think gold was nicer, so. Why am I overthinking this? Just, I don't want to add too many colors, so I'm going to, I realized I didn't add the top of the ornament here. And these really don't have to be perfect. Just enjoy what you're doing. You'll notice as soon as I added that little lifted part, I had to then kind of spread the paint throughout to kind of avoid harsh lines and stuff, which you know, can work, can fail, whatever. There we go. Now comes the metal. I'm getting a bit sloppy. I'm a little fatigued from my cold. That's quite understandable. And we might as well just jump into doing the tree boughs. So I'm going to do like a burnt sienna color for the very center. You can just keep yours entirely like green and brown, maybe like a colder brown, not so warm. If you want to keep things within the same color scheme, you don't have to go rusty like I did just now. And I'm going to use this dark green, pyrene green, oh my goodness. I've got to tell you the color I'm using. It is Perylene, Perylene. Gosh, I can't even read, I'm that tired. Okay, so you might start with, see, I've got a 4 here, so I can make some pretty nice shapes. And I'm going from the stem out, and I'm keeping it pretty abstracted, as I was saying, whimsical. This is a sap green, and I'm going to do a bunch a bit lighter at the sap green here, and then you might start with the lighter green and then add in darker later. So far so good. I kind of like that each one is a different green. Let us mix those together. It's a bit challenging when you get up to the actual shapes. You don't want to go over them, but because I want this bow to be behind. Seems to have worked out a little bit. I kind of like that the under drawing was in green, so anything that's showing up is kind of just adding to it. Now, you could go crazy and just keep adding and adding to the bows to make them look way more realistic, but I'm going to keep mine super stylized, just like that, and not overdo it, not go crazy. I realized that I've accidentally splattered some color, and I think it looks fabulous. So now I'm going to purposely do that. So let's take some paper towel. Should always have more paper towel than I have here because this is crazy. Now I don't think a 4 is going to cut it for making splatters. So you're going to want a much bigger brush or something that holds more water. This 8 looks really floofy. That might be really nice. Torn. I've never really, I haven't picked this up in ages, so we'll see what. Oh yeah, nice. Yep, the floofier the brush, the more successful your splatters. So that's a nice teal splatter. We should add another splatter, shouldn't we? Want to go yellow, but I don't know if that's a solid call or not, so I'm going to go blue. cobalt. Fun. No regrets there. That looks very whimsical. I enjoy it. So decorations, like a pattern on them, let's do that. We can do something as simple as some bands. Notice I'm curving them. To kind of go with the contour of the ball. And they're not perfect. That's okay. You know what I realized is that we should have continued actually focusing on the shadowing, like the shading of the balls before we kept going, but I still might be able to go back and work on that. But for the others, I should probably, I want to do them in order. So cobalt, and let's do a couple more of the shading layers before we do the pattern or decoration on them. I'm leaving that little blip there, smoothing out the transition between value 2 and value 3. And let's do the same with the green. I know I was going dark green, but I kind of think turquoise is the way to go. Also, splattering might be something you do last step. Oops. Rather than when we did it, so that you're not kind of picking up those little paint daubs as you go. Notice the blue, the cobalt just seeps into the green. Its pigments move more. It's pushing into this color, which is cool. It's fine. Every pigment's going to act a little differently, and until you really get to know them, it's a complete surprise every time. You're like, oh, didn't know that was going to happen. So, how to deal with the shading on this one? I'm just going to ignore those stripes I did and just try to do the shading over top. We'll see what happens. It's basically, it was still wet, so it just kind of erased it, which is okay. We want it to look cylindrical. My 3 highlights are looking really quite extreme. That's okay. I have cat hair in that one. Okay. What color should our ribbons be? I don't want to go stick within similar color palette and just go green. Should this go up beyond, or should it look like it's tying right there? Go up beyond. Keeping a bit of a loose hand there so that they're kind of asymmetrical or like abnormal, making them look more natural, more like maybe fabric would. And so excited to add decorations. You could pull in paint pens at this point, like Posca acrylic paint pens. Posca paint pens would be a really easy and fun way to add patterns to your ornaments. Otherwise, wait for them to dry. Could do that right now. What colors could we drop in? Well, if we drop yellow into here, it's going to look brown because yellow is opposite purple on the color wheel. So that wouldn't be the greatest thing, but we could drop in different color red maybe and see how that bleeds out. That's kind of looking fun, like a spotted one. What else? We could, just to add some pizzazz. What could we add to the green? We could add blue. We could add a bit of yellow to that. Let's try adding a bit of lemon yellow. And I'm not necessarily trying to make speckles or anything, I'm just trying to be a bit sporadic. So, cute little simple ornament painting, and we just have to wait for it to dry to add embellishments. I'm going to leave you there. You could write names on them. You could decorate them with markers, with more paint, splatter effect. You could use brush lettering and add a little like name right here, like the Earlies, etc., etc. I hope you enjoyed this little mini ornament experiment with me, and yeah, I will see you later. Thank you for joining me for the first in the Christmas themed watercolor tutorials. I hope you'll join me again next week for another one. See you soon.